Good day everyone, I am Berna Taguines and I will report the economic and financial development for the second quarter of 2021. I'll start with the economy real sector. The country GDP returns to positive. Here is the graph of GDP and the GNI. So after 5 consecutive quarters of contraction, the GDP registered a positive growth of 11.8% in the second quarter of 2021. As you can see at the graph, same sila ng GNI ng galaw. Pareho silang bumaba at the first quarter of 2020. Pareho din silang naka-recover pero si GNI nahuli ng konti. This is a signal that the economy is on its way to recovery. Kung i-compare siya sa last year na under tayo sa ECQ, 75% of our economy shut down. Kita naman sa graph na bumaba talaga especially dun sa second quarter of 2020. Next graph is the GDP by industry. The service sector grew by 9.6% in the second quarter of 2021. It is an improvement from the 17.1% decline last year. The agriculture, fishery, and forestry almost moved the same even during the ECQ. Meanwhile, among the major production sectors, the industry recorded the fastest growth. During the second quarter of 2020, it declines 21.8%. Based on the graph, pinaka-naapektuhan talaga sa pandemic is the service and the industry sector. Employment condition improved last year. Employment conditions were stable in April 2021. Of the employment rate remained at 91.3% based on preliminary result of the April 2021 labor force survey. The number of employed persons increased 4.9% in April 2021 compared from January 2021. On January 2021, 41.3 million persons are employed. On April, it increased to 43.3 million. Here is the graph of unemployment and underemployment rate. The unemployment rate was estimated 8.7% unchanged from previous period. It equivalent to 4.1 million persons of unemployed. Based on the survey, most unemployed were male, has 57.6%. Meanwhile, the underemployment increased 17.2% at the second quarter of this year, a total of 7.4 million persons. It is higher of 1.3 million persons from the 16% rate as of January 2021 or the first quarter of this year. 71.5% of underemployment are part-time workers and the 28.5% are full-time workers. 50.5% are belong to the service sector, 30.4% are belong to the agriculture, and 19.1% are in the industry. Now, let's go to the fiscal sector. National government cash operation lead to lower deficit. Here is the graph of cash operation of national government. The cash operation of national government yield a deficit of 394.6 billion in second quarter of 2021, a decline from the year ago deficit level of 474.3 billion pesos. As you can see, the revenue increased. The revenue for second quarter of 2021 reached 793.9 billion. It is 7.2% higher than the second quarter of 2020, which is 690.2 billion pesos. The increase was due mainly to the higher collection from tax revenue. The collection made by Bureau of Internal Revenue and Bureau of Customs is 20.5% higher compared last year. Their total collection from this year is 719.4 billion pesos. Now let's talk about the expenditure. The expenditure in the second quarter of 2021 reached 1,188.5 billion pesos. It is higher of 2.1% compared last year and has a total of 1,164.5 billion. The increase in spending for the period was due to the continued implementation of various COVID-19 mitigation and recovery measures. The track record of fiscal year discipline has generated sufficient fiscal space to be allocated mainly into the funding health and social protection program, as well as economic stimulus measures against the widespread and profound impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's discuss the monetary sector. Headline inflation slows but stays above the target. Here is the table of inflation. The inflation slowed down to 4.3% at the second quarter this year. From 4.5% of the first quarter this year means in the first half of this year, the average inflation is 4.4%. It is higher than the target of the government for this year, which is 3%. The core inflation decreased. The trimmed mean remained the same. Weighted median decreased. The volatile items increase, or the non-food inflation. It is due in the part of transport inflation, mostly driven by the rising domestic petroleum prices reflected the increase in international oil prices. Though the transport inflation slowed down owing to base effect from the significant increase in tricycle fares. Domestic liquidity growth is money supply, or the M3, grew by 6.5%. Preliminary as of the end of the June 2021 amounted to 14.4 billion pesos, slower than the 8.5% expansion as of the end of the March 2021. It is due mainly to the continued decline in the claims on the private sector, reflecting weak bank lending. The bank lending remains subdued. The outstanding loan of Universal and Commercial Bank, net of reverse repurchase placement with the BSP, declined by 2% in June 2021, as concern over the spread of new coronavirus variant continue to temper market sentiment and outlook for economic recovery. The BSP maintains accommodative monetary policy setting. During the monetary policy meeting in second quarter of 2021, the BSP keeps its policy interest rate steady at 2% for the overnight reverse repurchase facility. During the review period, the BSP noted that the latest inflation forecast indicate that the average inflation is likely to settle near the upper end of the target range of 2 to 4% in 2021. The BSP expected that the average inflation will ease toward the midpoint of the target range in 2022 and 2023. Price pressure on food commodities have abated with favorable weather conditions and the facilitation of meat imports to augment domestic supply. The BSP emphasized that the continued implementation of direct non-monetary measures will be crucial in mitigating further supply-side pressure of the meat price and inflation. At the same time, the risk of the inflation outlook remain broadly balanced around the baseline projection path. The uptick in the international commodity prices amid supply chain bottlenecks and the recovery of the global demand could lend upside pressure on inflation. However, downside risks of the inflation outlook continue to emanate from the emergence of new coronavirus variant, which could delay the easing of containment measure and temper prospect of domestic growth. The BSP affirmed its support to the economy for as long as necessary to ensure its strong and sustainable recovery. The BSP will also remain vigilant against any emerging risks to the outlook for inflation and growth and will adjust its policy setting as needed to safeguard its price and financial stability objectives. Next is the financial sector. Banking system assets and deposits sustain moderate growth. The Philippine banking system showed resilience and stability in the second quarter of 2021 as the country's economic activities and financial transactions continue to recover from the disruption caused by the pandemic and quarantine measures. Here is the performance of banking system based on the market size. The number of the bank institution decreases. In the second quarter of 2020, the number of bank institution has a total of 541. It decreased to 528 at the first quarter of 2020 and decreased also at the second quarter to 523. During the same period, the operating network or the head offices and branches or agencies of the banking system expand from the 12,912 in the second quarter of 2020, it increased to 13,114 until the second quarter of 2021. As of June 2021, the resources of banking system reached 20.4 trillion pesos. It is higher of 1.8% compared last quarter and 6.9% compared to the last year. Now let's go to the external sector. The international reserve settled higher. The country's gross international reserve increase compared to the last quarter amounted to 105.76 million US dollar from 104.48 million US dollar. External debt increased but remains prudent. This quarter, the Philippine external debt outstanding 101.2 billion US dollar. It is higher of 4.1 billion compared to the last quarter amounted to 97 billion US dollar. The peso appreciates as the economy shows signs of recovery. The peso slightly appreciated by 0.21% compared to the last quarter. At the first quarter of 2021, the per dollar exchange costs 48.28 pesos. At the second quarter of 2021, it decreased to 48.18 pesos per dollar. Now let's talk about the financial condition of BSP. This table shows that the asset and the liability of the BSP increased. The asset increased by 1.7% from the 7,558.7 billion pesos at March 2021. It increased to 7,685.6 billion pesos. The liability increased by 1.3% from 7,432.4 billion pesos at the March 2021. It increased to 7,529.4 billion pesos. Here is the table of the net income position of the BSP. Based on preliminary data, the BSP registered a net income of 20 billion pesos of the review quarter. The lower net income as compared to the previous quarter was attributed mainly to the significant increase in interest of national government deposit combined with the large decline in miscellaneous income. The total revenue for the second quarter 2021 amounted to 48 billion pesos, almost unchanged from the revenue posted in the previous quarter. Global economic development show divergence. Economic prospects have diverged further across countries, with vaccine access emerging as critical factor toward global recovery. Growth in most countries has been attributed mainly to the low base posted in the second quarter of 2020. Although recovery is still uncertain even in countries where infections are low, for some countries, higher inflation was observed following the reopening of their economies and supply-side bottlenecks. Global economic activity is forecasted to improve for the balance of 2021 and into 2022 on the back of improvements in vaccination, reopening of economies, and continued policy support. That's all our report. Thank you for listening.
Good day, everyone. I'm Reynald Kiabiab and we will tackle the BSP's financial statement. The Statement of Financial Position or Balance Sheet. Balance sheet refers to a financial statement that reports a company's assets, liabilities, and shareholders' equity at a specific point in time. Ang balance sheet ay ang nagiging basis ng investors para sa possible return na pwedeng makuha at nagsiserve din ito para ma-evaluate ang capital structure ng isang company. BSP Statement of Financial Position. Under the foreign financial assets, nandito ang international reserves. So first, the deposits with foreign banks. The BSP's deposit on foreign banks consists of two types of deposit. These are due from foreign banks demand deposits and due from foreign banks time deposit. Just like in commercial banks, demand deposits are deposits that can be withdrawn without any restrictions, while time deposits are deposits that are gaining interest and cannot be withdrawn until the end of its term. What mostly affected the increase on deposits with foreign banks in 2020 is the increase of time deposit money that went from 330 billion 571 million 390,837 pesos in 2019 to 659 billion 200 million 531,665 pesos in the year 2020. That's why BSP's deposits with foreign banks increased by 71% in the 2020 with a total of 784 billion 319 million 426,533 pesos compared to the previous year's deposit with foreign banks amounting to 458 billion 569 million 941,823 pesos. Next is other cash balances. Other cash balances represent fiat foreign currency notes that was purchased from authorized agent banks. Other cash balances of the BSP have decreased by 93% on the year 2020. It went from 1,518,338,400 pesos on 2019 to 106,326,870 on the year 2020. Next is investment securities. BSP's investment securities increased by 17.06%. The BSP's investment securities went up from 2,865,653,547,551 pesos in the year 2019 to 3,354,507,493,969 pesos on the year 2020. Under investment securities of the BSP, nakapaloob dito ang marketable securities at other investments. Marketable securities consist of foreign securities and repurchase agreements. Ang marketable securities ng BSP ay nag-increase ng 378,977,479,901 mula sa 2,70,3,661,282 noong 2019. While ang other investments of the BSP includes externally managed fund amounting to 820.77 billion, Asia Bond Fund amounting to 40.499 billion, and Bank for Settlement and Investment Pool amounting to 34.562 billion. Foreign securities purchased under the agreement to be resell. This represents excess funds of BSP's daily requirement held and invested automatically in an overnight facility. The foreign securities purchased under the agreement to be resell went down by 22.7%, coming from 639 billion 591 million 917,167 pesos on 2019 to just 493 billion 434 million 861 million and 731 pesos on the year of 2020. Next is the loan to International Monetary Fund. The loan to International Monetary Fund went down to 1,4,613,753 pesos or decreased by 28.42% because of the repayment and revaluation adjustments made by the BSP on the year 2020, amounting to 397,133,974 pesos. Next is gold. Gold is divided into two, the gold in bullion vaults and the gold in foreign financial institutions. The ending balance of gold in bullion vaults in 2019 was 136,376,437,437 pesos and went up to 246,727,992,903 pesos, or increased by 44.73%. This is because of the net increase that happened after the price or rate evaluation amounting to 110,351,555,466 pesos. While gold in foreign financial institutions, the BSP purchased 48,570 worth of gold and had a net increase amounting to 39,726,432,563 pesos because of price or rate revaluation. That's why the gold increased by 36.9% from 2019's 407,222,442,383 pesos to 557,305,283,512 pesos in the year of 2020. Next is the International Monetary Fund with Special Drawing Rights. The Special Drawing Rights, or SDR, is an international reserve asset created by IMF in 1969 to supplement its members' countries' official reserves. Ang value ng SDR ay based sa 5 foreign currencies which are US dollar, Euro, Japanese yen, Chinese renminbi, and British pound sterling. The International Monetary Fund with Special Drawing Rights has increased by 1.51% coming from 60,122,874,556 pesos on 2019 to just 59,213,855,621 pesos on the year of 2020. And all of this is the reason why the gross international reserves of the BSP went up to 5,249,891,861,989 pesos on 2020, which is 18.4% higher to the previous year's gross international reserves amounting to 4,434,082,591,158 pesos. Still under the foreign financial assets is the foreign currency receivables. Other foreign currency receivables consist of non-international reserve foreign exchange assets, accrued interest on non-international reserve, due from foreign banks or branches, and accrued income receivable. The foreign currency receivable increased by 77.1% from 104,788,346,177 on 2019 to 185,630,158,646 pesos on 2020. The one that really affect the increase in other foreign currency receivable is the non-international reserve foreign exchange assets that increased to almost 82 billion compared to 2019's. Next is the non-international reserve for foreign currency. Non-international reserve for foreign currency represents foreign currency holdings under the currency exchange of overseas Filipino workers or OFWs. The non-international reserve for foreign currency decreased by 1.09% from 32,054,478 pesos on 2019 to 31,706,140 pesos on 2020. All of this leads to the total foreign currency financial assets of These are the reasons why the total foreign currency financial assets increased by 19.8% on 2020, amounting to 5,435,553,730,287 pesos compared to previous year's 4,538,920,834,906 pesos, and investment securities becoming the main reasons of the increase in the total foreign currency financial assets because of the jump that is worth almost 500 billion pesos. Now let's go to local currency financial assets. First is the investment securities. The investment securities have increased by 510.7% from 2019's investment securities amounting to 226 billion 137 million 2,076 pesos, and jumped to the 2020s amounting to 1 trillion 380 billion 925 million 71,581 pesos. The main reason of the massive increase on the investment security is the purchases of investment securities that was made during the year of 2020, amounting to 1 trillion 593 billion 135 million 255,457 pesos, compared to 2019's 421 billion 793 million 175,132 pesos. Next is the loans and advances. The loans and advances have decreased by 17.7% on the year 2020. It went from 159 billion 46 million 281,749 pesos to 130 billion 888 million 266,756 pesos on the year of 2020. The reason that made a huge decrease on the loans and advances is the loans of PDIC to be intended as a financial assistance to the banks. The loans of PDIC decreased to 35.978 billion compared to 2019's 53.614 billion because of the collection happened during the year of 2020 amounting to 17.636 billion. Next is the overnight lending facility. Overnight lending facility is a BSB standing facility that allows bank and non-quasi-banking functions to obtain from the BSP an open volume basis in order to cover short-term liquidity. As of December 31, 2020, there were no outstanding overnight lending facility that was availed by the BSP. Due from administrator or funds. The due from administrator or funds have increased by 10.5% from 2019's 32 billion 732 million 310,239 pesos to 36 billion 176 million 569,764 pesos on the year 2020. The increase that happened on 2020 represents income from managed fund in the amount of 241.532 million and an additional provision for reserve of currency insurance fund amounting to 3.199 billion, and the other receivables. On other receivables, it decreased by 4.59%, coming from 23 billion 235 million 653,712 on 2019 to 222 billion 169 million 467,627 pesos on 2019. Accounts receivable TOP is what really affected the decrease. That is almost a billion peso. Account receivable TOP is a special receivable account used to record the annual revaluation of the IMF holdings of pesos maintained with the BSP change in peso to special drawing rights exchange rate. The balance decreased by 0.950 billion due to the revaluation of the IMF holding during the year 2020. The total local currency of the BSP on 2020 have increased by 225.6%, amounting to 1 trillion 570 billion 159 million 375,728 pesos. Compare on 2019, that is 482,271,462,764 pesos. The main reason of the increase is the massive increase of investment securities because of the purchases made that amounted to 1,593,135,255,457 pesos. And the total financial assets of 2020 have increased by 39.5%, which is a really huge jump from 2019's 5,021,192,297,670 pesos to 7,5,713,106,015 pesos on the year of 2020. Now on to the other assets. First is the acquired assets held for sale. These are the acquired assets readily available for disposition during the year. Bank policies on the valuation of these assets are the same with the investment property. The acquired assets held for sale increased by 977.5% from 2019's 130 million 59,034 pesos to 1,401,449,080 pesos on 2020. During the year of 2020, there were transfer from investment property happened amounting to 1,863,871,263 pesos. That made the acquired assets held for sale jump to 1,883,683,668 pesos. But during the year, there were also sales of assets made amounting to 355,692,881 pesos, and a revert of assets that become an investment property amounting to 25,587,514 pesos. Next is investment property. Investment properties are land and buildings acquired by BSP either through foreclosure, dación and pago in settlements of loans and advances of defaulting banks, and etc. The investment property went down by 13.03%, coming from 11,913,331,782 pesos on 2019 to just 10,360,343,070 pesos on the year 2020. The main reason of the decrease on the investment property is that 1,863,871,263 pesos worth of property were converted or transferred to acquired assets held for sale. Next is bank premises, furnitures, fixtures, and equipment or BPFFE. The total cost of BPFFE on the year 2020 is 41,536,070,966 pesos, with an accumulated depreciation of 18,400,952,522 pesos that lead the value of BPFFE to 23,135,118,474 pesos. While on 2019, the total cost of BPFFE is 40,324,618,251 pesos, with an accumulated depreciation of 15,896,525,819 pesos that lead the value of BPFFE on 2019 to 24,408,757,822 pesos on the year of 2019. Next is the intangible assets. The intangible assets increased by 0.67% from 2020, coming from 259,550,202 pesos on 2019 to 261,285,781 pesos on 2020. Next is the inventories. The inventories have increased by 65% on 2020 from 2019. The 2019's inventory is 12,324,337,727 pesos and went up to 20,330,030,644 pesos in 2020. The reasons of the increase of inventory are: first, the increase in plant inventories because of the purchases of outsourced currency and plant consumables. It went from 6,704,634,599 pesos to 12,497,354,500 pesos, 15 pesos. Next is the gold and silver refining. The increase in gold and silver refining are the result from gold deliveries or purchases. It increased to 5,242,082,151 pesos compared to 2,533,659,084 pesos on the previous year. Next is the purchase of residue material used for gold and silver for refining recovery amounting to 10,084,628 pesos compared to last year where there were no purchases made. Property dividend to NG. The property dividend still remained the same as 2019's 285,214,339 pesos. Next is the deferred tax assets. On the deferred tax assets, there were no such movement happen on the 2020. The deferred tax assets have increased by 0.03% amounting to 11,986,154,674 pesos compared to 2019's 11,982,580,091 pesos. Next is the miscellaneous assets. The miscellaneous assets was up by 7.2% on the year 2020, coming from 1,480,831,521 pesos on 2019 to 1,587,326,445 on 2020. The total other assets on 2020 increased by 10.5% coming from 62,784,662,500 pesos on 2019 to 69,346,922,507 on 2020. Inventories is the main reason on the increase of other assets, jumping from 12,324,337,727 pesos to 20,330,030,064 pesos. Overall, the total assets have increased by 39.2%, coming from 5,83,976,960,188 pesos on 2019 to 7,75,060,028,522 pesos on the year of 2020.
Hi everyone, my name is Marita Lia F. Ferrer, and I am going to continue discuss the balance sheet. Next is liabilities. So what is liabilities? A liability is a financial obligation of a company that results in the company's future sacrifice of economic benefits to other entities or businesses. A liability can be an alternative to equity as a source of a company's financing. Moreover, some liabilities, such as account payable or income taxes payable, are essential parts of day-to-day business operations. Last is the capital or equity. So what is equity? Equity is the value that will be returned to a company shareholders if all the assets will liquidate and all the company's debt were paid off. So sa balance sheet, kailangan magtali yung value ng assets sa value ng liabilities and equities. In terms of liabilities and capital accounts ng Bangko Sentral, napansin naman natin na tumaas ito. For total foreign currency financial liabilities, nakakuha sila ng 220 billion 733 million 656,000 and 531 pesos during the pandemic. Samantalang noong 2020 naman, nakakuha sila ng 375 billion 75 million 20,000 and 886 pesos during the pandemic. So, nag-increase ito ng 154 billion 341 million 364,000 and 355 pesos. Nung nag-increase siya, capable naman yung company na bayaran siya dahil mas mataas yung foreign currency ng financial asset nila kaysa sa foreign currency financial liabilities ng Bangko Sentral. And next, sa local currency liabilities nila, they obtain an amount of 2,585 billion 382 million 839,000 and 146 pesos during 2019, while 3,976 billion 561 million 141,000 and 165 pesos during 2020. So, nag-increase ito ng 1,391 billion 178 million 302,000 and 19 pesos. Though mas malaki pa rin yung local currency financial asset. Next on the other liabilities of Bangko Sentral, they obtain an amount of 2,132 billion 767 million 806,000 and 596 pesos during pre-pandemic, while 2,372 million 314,000 and 497 pesos during the pandemic. Nag-increase ito ng 419 billion 604 million 507,000 and 901 pesos. Sa other liabilities naman ng Bangko Sentral, lahat ng account ay tumaas during 2020, except sa deferred tax liability na bumaba during 2020 ng worth of 753,084 pesos. The Bangko Sentral of the Philippines total financial liabilities during 2019 was 4,938 billion 884 million 302,000 and 273 pesos, while 6,904 billion 808 million 476,000 and 548 pesos during 2020. So, nag-increase yung financial liabilities ng 1,965 billion 124 million 154,000 and 275 pesos. Though nag-increase yung liabilities nila, mas mataas pa rin yung asset nila, which is a good indication dahil capable pa rin yung company na mabayaran yung obligation nila. In terms of debt capital naman, mapapansin natin during 2019 and 2020, same ang halaga ng capital ng company which amounting to 50 billion pesos. Lahat naman ng capital accounts ng Bangko Sentral is tumaas kahit pandemic. The total capital account of the company during 2019 pre-pandemic is 145 billion 92,657,915 pesos, while 2020 they obtained an amount of 171 billion 51,551,974 pesos. Nag-increase ito ng 25 billion 958,894,059 pesos, which is good indication for their company kahit pandemic nag-increase pa rin yung kanilang capital. The total liabilities and capital of Bangko Sentral of the Philippines during 2019 was 5,383,960,188 pesos during 2020. 7,75,060,522 pesos, which is all equal to the amount of their total assets.